I should have walked away the moment the hostess gave me that look. You know the kind. The quiet, judgmental kind that slips across a person's face before they can hide it. The restaurant was full that evening. Soft lights clinking glasses, couples leaning in close, and right in the center of it all stood a man who clearly did not belong there. At least that was what everyone's eyes were saying. He walked in carrying two little girls, one on each hip, both with messy curls and mismatched barrettes. A diaper bag hung from his shoulder like it weighed more than both children combined. His shirt was wrinkled, his jeans were faded. He looked exhausted in a way that made me wonder if he had taken a breath at all that day. The hostess stepped forward with a strained smile. "Table for 3, she asked, glancing at the children as though they were ticking clocks waiting to explode. He cleared his throat and shifted the girls in his arms. Actually, it was supposed to be 2 adults. But it is just me and them now. The woman blinked, clearly thrown off, then her voice dropped into a hush that absolutely everyone in line could still hear. "Sir, this is a fine dining environment. Children can be disruptive. Maybe a quick takeout order would be better for you." The man stiffened. He did not argue, did not protest, did not even correct her tone. He simply nodded with that defeated kind of politeness people learn when they are used to being dismissed. The twins clung to him confused. And that was when something inside me twisted, because I knew that feeling, the feeling of being gently pushed out of rooms you had every right to enter, of being talked down to by people who had already decided who you were. Before I could talk myself out of it, I walked toward them. The hostess brightened. "Hello again. You are here for the 7:30 reservation." "Yes," I said. "Window table. The one with children." She blinked at me, then at the man, and something clicked in her expression. She thought we were together. She thought this was my family. "Perfect," she chirped and grabbed 2 menus. "This way." The man turned to me with a startled look. "You do not have to do this," he murmured. I smiled. "I know, but I want to." We walked to the table in a strange little procession. The twins stared at me like I was some kind of puzzle piece they had been waiting to snap into place. The man let them slide down into their booster seats and whispered a soft thank you to me without meeting my eyes. I sat across from him, feeling every curious stare in the room prickling along my skin. I did not know his name yet. I did not know why he had shown up to a blind date with 2 little girls, or why the woman he was supposed to meet had bailed on him so suddenly that he did not have time to change plans. I only knew the heaviness around him, a heaviness that did not come from poverty the way people assumed. It was something deeper, something human, something worn. The server arrived quicker than normal, which told me exactly what I needed to know. They were trying to hurry us, maybe get us fed and gone before the dinner rush fully bloomed. He placed water glasses down and shifted the check presenter in his hand like he already wanted to use it. My stomach tightened. The man reached for a crayon to hand to one of his daughters. His fingers trembled slightly. I did not think he meant for me to see. The girls settled quickly. One drew swirls. The other tried to sketch a cat with uneven lines, her tongue sticking out from concentration. She looked up at me and pushed the napkin toward my side of the table. "For you," she said. Her father blushed like he was embarrassed by how sweet his children were. I opened my mouth to ask their names, to break the tension somehow. But before I could, the server returned and placed the check down. Not after the meal, not even after the drinks. Right there at the start. The message was clear. Pay or leave. The man froze. He lifted the bill. His face drained. I could see it all in the tiny flicker of panic he tried to hide. He had gotten dressed down, worn old jeans, driven who knew what car. Left his real world behind for one night because someone on an app had agreed to meet him. He had shown up anyway, kids and all, and the world had punished him for it. Something in me snapped. I reached out, calmly slid the check from his hand and tucked my card inside. His head jerked up. "Wait, you do not have to." I brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. "Maybe you have had a week. Maybe you need one small moment that is not heavy. Let me." He stared at me like he had never seen kindness offered without strings. His daughters watched us with wide, hopeful eyes. The server returned, took the card, and for the first time all evening, the man's shoulders eased. Not much, just a fraction. but enough for me to see the truth. He was not fragile. He was tired. He was carrying more than 2 little girls. And even though I did not know his story yet, I already knew this moment mattered. The napkin cat drawing still sat near my hand. I did not know then that it would become the symbol of everything that followed. I only knew one thing. I had just sat down at the wrong table, and my whole life had begun to shift. The moment the server walked away with my card, the atmosphere at the table shifted not dramatically, not loudly, but in a quiet ripple that I felt all the way through my chest. The restaurant around us buzzed with conversations and clinking glasses, but inside our small corner by the window, it felt like someone had pressed pause on the world. The man sat across from me with his hands folded tightly, knuckles pale as if he feared the air between us might break. His daughters were the only ones unbothered, humming softly to themselves as they colored their small shoulders, touching as though they were 2 halves of a single heartbeat. He cleared his throat once, then again, but no words followed. I could feel the weight of his thoughts. It sat between us like a shadow neither of us wanted to name. I had interrupted something. I had stepped into a moment I was never supposed to see. And yet here I was, seated at a table with a stranger and his 2 little girls paying for a meal we had not even ordered, pretending I belonged in a story that was not mine. He lifted his gaze slowly, cautiously, like he expected disappointment in my eyes. Instead, I offered him a small smile. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. He blinked fast, almost startled by the question. "I am fine." His voice was too steady, too controlled, the voice of someone who had learned to hold himself together, even when the seams were tearing. One of the girls looked up at him. "Daddy, can I have the purple crayon?" He nodded and slid it toward her without taking his eyes off me. "Thank you for earlier," he said quietly, "for stepping in. You did not have to do that." I tilted my head. I know, but sometimes the thing you do not have to do ends up mattering the most. He exhaled like someone who had been holding his breath for too long. The silence returned softer this time, less sharp. The girls kept coloring, absorbed in their world of uneven cats and rainbow scribbles. Their innocence created a strange bubble around us, as if the entire restaurant had faded into the background and only our table remained. I watched him for a moment. The exhaustion on his face was not a temporary kind. It was etched into the lines at the corners of his eyes, in the tension around his jaw, in the way he scanned the room as though expecting judgment to fall on him again. He did not wear poverty. He wore responsibility. Heavy responsibility. "Where is their mother?" I asked before I could stop myself. His body tensed. "She passed away 3 years ago." His voice did not crack, but something inside the words did. I felt the floor shift beneath my emotional footing. "I am sorry," I murmured, and I meant it with my whole heart. He nodded once as though accepting the condolences he had probably been offered hundreds of times. "My daughters and I, we do most things together. I do not leave them with babysitters often. Tonight was an exception, but the sitter canceled last minute." I swallowed. "So you brought them with you?" He let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "I figured honesty was better than pretending I could be someone I am not." "That is rare," I said. "Most people fake perfection on dates." He shook his head. "I am too tired to pretend." The girls giggled, suddenly interrupting us. "Look, miss," they chorused, holding up the napkin with the cat drawing, now improved with polka dots and a surprisingly large smile. I gasped dramatically. "That is the greatest cat I have ever seen." They beamed with the pure, unfiltered pride only children have. Their father watched them, and I saw a flicker of something warm passing through his eyes, something hopeful, something fragile. Could he have been waiting for someone to see them not as baggage, but as part of him? He reached for his water glass, then paused. "I never asked your name." "Sadie," I said. He repeated it once under his breath, like he wanted to remember how it felt. "I am Daniel." I smiled. "Nice to meet you, Daniel." He nodded. "You too." The server returned with bread and a forced smile. He set the basket down a little too quickly. I felt Daniel stiffen again. I leaned in slightly and said, "Do you mind if we take our time tonight? I think the girls could use a slow evening." The server blinked, then nodded. "Of course." He retreated, and Daniel looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. "Why are you being kind to us?" he whispered. "Most people walk away once they see me with the twins." I shrugged gently. "I didn't walk away because you looked honest and tired and like someone who deserved one calm night." His throat moved as he swallowed, and he whispered, "Thank you," in a tone that felt heavier than the words themselves. Outside the window, the city lights flickered like distant stars. Inside our quiet bubble, the girls finished their drawings and leaned against each other in sleepy contentment. Daniel watched them, then turned back to me with a look that asked a silent question. "Why now? Why you? Why?" This moment, I did not know the answer yet. I only knew one thing for certain. The silence in that room was no longer empty. It was full of something new, something waiting, something that felt like the start of a story neither of us had expected to live. I felt the shift before I could name it, a subtle change in the air around our little table, like the moment before a match catches fire. It was nothing dramatic, nothing grand, but it was unmistakable, the gentle spark of something beginning. Dinner arrived with the usual chaos that follows small children. Noodles dangling from forks, juice threatening to spill, tiny elbows knocking against plates. I had always admired the quiet resilience of single parents, but watching Daniel manage the twins up close was something else entirely. He moved with a certain practiced gentleness, the kind that can only come from years of doing everything alone. Yet beneath that grace was a kind of exhaustion that tugged at my heart. He cut Emma's spaghetti into smaller pieces while answering Ella's questions about whether cats could eat pizza, and somehow still managed to offer me an apologetic smile every time the girls splashed sauce a little too far. I kept waiting for him to unravel, to raise his voice, to snap the way stressed adults sometimes do when pressure piles higher than they can carry, but he never did. His voice remained soft, patient, warm. The spark flickered again. I found myself staring when he wasn't looking, noticing things I should not have been noticing. The way his eyes softened when he looked at his daughters, the way his tired smile still held kindness, the faint crease between his brows that only deepened when he thought he wasn't enough. And that was when it hit me. He didn't just think he was failing as a father, he believed it. The realization settled in my chest like a weight I didn't expect to feel. At one point, Emma dropped her fork and looked at me with the seriousness only 4-year-olds can muster. "Do you like us?" "Miss Sadie?" Daniel froze, clearly stunned by the question, his eyes darting to me in apology. But I smiled and replied, "Yes, sweetheart, I like you very much." Both girls lit up instantly, and Daniel exhaled with a relief that felt too deep for such a small moment. That was when the spark grew a little brighter. The meal became easier after that. The girls relaxed, and so did Daniel, and before long, laughter filled our corner of the restaurant. I told them a story about how I once got locked inside a laundromat because I fell asleep waiting for my clothes to dry. They burst into giggles, especially when I mimed pounding on the glass to get someone's attention. Daniel watched me tell the story, really watched, and I felt his gaze like a quiet confession. When the server brought dessert without being asked, leaving behind 2 small bowls of ice cream and a plate with a single slice of cheesecake, the twins cheered, and Daniel gave the kind of half-laugh, half-sigh that says you've already given up on controlling the night. The spark grew warmer. As the girls ate, I noticed Daniel checking his phone only once, quickly, discreetly, as if he didn't want me to see whether he had messages from the woman he was supposed to be meeting. He didn't. His screen was empty. For reasons I couldn't fully explain, that mattered to me. After dessert, when the twins started to grow sleepy, their little heads drooping onto their father's shoulders, Daniel cleared his throat. "I should probably get them home before they fall asleep on the table." I nodded, but something in his tone made me slow down. This wasn't a polite ending. This was hesitation. This was him not wanting the night to end. I felt it too. He gathered the diaper bag and lifted Emma gently into his arms. Ella wrapped her small hand around my finger like she thought she was supposed to take me with them. I froze at the unexpected warmth of it. Daniel cleared his throat softly, catching the moment. "She really likes you," he murmured. I looked up at him. "And what about you?" Daniel swallowed, a faint flush rising in his cheeks. "I like you too." The spark became a quiet flame. Outside the restaurant, the breeze was cool, and the streetlights cast a soft glow across the sidewalk. Daniel's old sedan sat crookedly in a small parking lot, its paint chipped and headlights clouded with age. He shifted the twins into their car seats with the tenderness of a man who had done this ritual thousands of times. I stood nearby, watching the gentleness of it, the care, the love. And then, when the girls were settled and the night turned still, Daniel closed the car door softly and turned to me. "Thank you for tonight, Sadie. I don't remember the last time someone sat with us and didn't make us feel like a burden." "You didn't feel like a burden to me," I said quietly. "You felt like a family." His breath hitched. He looked at me like I had offered him something he had long stopped believing existed. For a moment, we said nothing. The world around us felt hushed, suspended. The twins murmured sleepily in the back seat. A gentle wind brushed against us. Daniel stepped closer, only a little hesitating, as though afraid he'd break something delicate. "I hope this isn't the last time," he said. His voice was soft but sincere. "I didn't expect to feel anything tonight. But then you walked in and the whole evening changed." I felt the spark settle low and warm inside me. "I hope it's not the last time either," I whispered. Daniel's shoulders relaxed, a small smile forming on his lips, real and unguarded. For the first time since I met him, he looked not tired but hopeful. A quiet beginning had been lit between us, fragile but real. And standing under the soft glow of a street lamp, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The spark wasn't going out. If anything, it was only just beginning. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, the soft light filtering through my curtains, carrying a strange kind of warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't excitement, not exactly, and it wasn't fear either. It was something in between, something trembling and unsteady that made my hands linger a little too long on the edge of my coffee mug. I told myself it was ridiculous. I had shared one dinner with a man and his daughters, one strange, unexpected, chaotic dinner. Yet the memory of it stayed with me like a quiet hum, the girls with their scribbled drawings, Daniel's tired but gentle smile, the way his voice softened when he said my name, the way the night had shifted from awkward to something warm. And underneath all of that, something else had lingered. A moment I hadn't been able to let go of. When the server brought the check early long before the meal was over, Daniel had gone still. Not the stillness of a man embarrassed by money. It was deeper than that. Older. Heavy like something he had carried for too many nights. He had panicked just for a second, and I saw it. He tried to hide it, but I had seen the truth flicker through the cracks. That moment stayed with me through my morning shift at the library. It followed me as I restocked books, helped children search for stories about dragons, and answered questions from tourists about local history. It clung to me like a shadow. Why had he frozen? What was he hiding? It wasn't the kind of freeze that came from being broke. It wasn't even shame. It was fear. Fear of being seen. Fear of being judged. But fear of what exactly? Around noon, I stepped outside for fresh air, leaning against the railing by the library steps. The day was bright and warm. A soft breeze lifted my hair, yet none of it eased the knot that had formed behind my ribs. I replayed his reactions in my mind. The old car, the worn clothes, the diaper bag held together by years of use, the way he avoided eye contact when money was mentioned. But then, there were the things that didn't fit. His hands. They weren't the hands of someone who worked manual jobs or lived paycheck to paycheck. They were steady, clean. His posture was too straight, too trained, like someone who had once lived in a world that required confidence. His vocabulary was careful, calm, educated. His eyes, when he looked at me, carried the kind of quiet intelligence that didn't align with the version of himself he had presented at the restaurant. Something wasn't adding up. My thoughts were interrupted by a small voice behind me. "Miss Sadie." A tiny girl tugged at my sleeve, holding a book with two hands as if it were something delicate. "Can you read this to me?" My heart softened, and I sank onto the bench beside her, reading aloud the story of a bear who lost his hat. The girl giggled, leaned into me, and asked for another story. For a moment, I let go of everything. When her mother came to pick her up, thanking me for watching her daughter, I waved goodbye and slipped back inside. but the uneasy feeling returned almost instantly. By evening, I realized something important. It wasn't my job to analyze Daniel. It wasn't my place to question his life or assume I understood the pieces he didn't share. But there was a difference between prying and noticing. And I had noticed something. The truth around him wavered. Not because he lied, but because he withheld. And I couldn't stop wondering why. As I walked home through the quiet streets, I tried to talk myself out of it. I reminded myself that this was just a chance encounter, a wrong table leading to a strangely meaningful dinner, nothing more. Yet every time I tried to close that door, I saw his daughters' faces in my mind. Ella's shy smile, Emma's bold curiosity, their giggles, their trust. And then Daniel's voice, soft and hesitant. I hope this isn't the last time. My phone buzzed suddenly, startling me. A message from an unknown number. Hi, Sadie. It is Daniel. I hope it is okay that I texted you. The restaurant hostess passed along your number. I stared at the screen, my pulse kicking upward. Of course. I texted back before I could overthink. A moment later, 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then came back. This happened 4 times before the message finally arrived. The girls cannot stop talking about you. Ella drew another cat. She wants to give it to you. I pressed a hand to my chest, the warmth there almost painful. I would love to see it, I typed. The dots appeared again. Would you like to meet at the park tomorrow? He added quickly. We can keep it simple. Just the playground. Nothing fancy. Nothing fancy. It was an odd phrase. People usually said that when they feared disappointing someone, when they feared being judged, when they feared not being enough. And there it was again, that quiet, trembling truth behind his words. Something was off. Not wrong, not dangerous, just off. But the spark from last night tugged at me gently, and the idea of seeing the twins again made my heart rise in a way I didn't expect. I typed, "Yes, I would love that." His reply came instantly. "Thank you, Sadie. You have no idea what this means to us." I lowered my phone slowly, staring at the message, at the sincerity behind it, at the fragile honesty woven into it. And something inside me whispered that whatever this was, it was about to grow. The truth was still blurry, but the feeling was clear. The spark from last night hadn't faded. It had only become brighter. The next afternoon, I arrived at the park early, partly because I didn't want to keep the girls waiting, and partly because my nerves refused to let me stay still at home. The playground was quiet at this hour, just a few toddlers climbing the plastic steps, and a couple of parents chatting under the shade of a maple tree. I sat on a bench near the swings, smoothing my skirt unnecessarily, glancing down at the book I'd brought as an excuse in case I needed something to do with my hands. But as soon as Daniel's car pulled up, all thoughts of pretending vanished. 2 small figures burst out before he could even close his door. "Miss Sadie," they shouted in unison, barreling toward me with the kind of joy that felt like sunlight spreading through my chest. I barely had time to brace myself before they collided with my knees, hugging me with all the fierce sincerity only children possess. I laughed, brushing hair from their faces. "I missed you too." When I looked up, Daniel was walking toward us, slightly out of breath, his hair ruffled as if he'd rushed to get them ready. The moment our eyes met, something unspoken passed between us, something warm and cautious and trembling with possibility. "I hope they weren't too much when we texted last night," he said, adjusting the diaper bag on his shoulder. "They were too excited to sleep." I shook my head. "They're perfect." And instantly his shoulders relaxed. The girls dragged me toward the swings, talking over each other about the new drawing they made. Emma said she drew the cat's tail too long. Ella insisted she drew it exactly right. They shoved the paper into my hands, eyes bright with expectation. The drawing was crooked, colorful, chaotic. I loved it. I looked at Daniel, and he gave me a small, shy smile. "They wanted to bring it to you themselves." As the girls ran off toward the slide, he sat beside me on the bench, his knee brushing mine briefly. That small touch sent a surprising jolt through my chest, but neither of us moved away. I admit he murmured I wasn't sure you'd actually come. I met his eyes. Why wouldn't I? He looked down at his hands, rubbing his thumb against a small scrape on his knuckle. Because most people don't stay after one messy dinner. I frowned, but that wasn't my experience. He exhaled, quiet and tired. You must think I'm a disaster sometimes. But before I could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air. Daniel, what on earth are you doing here? My pulse stumbled. I turned to see a woman striding toward us, heels sinking slightly into the grass, expression pinched with irritation. Her hair was sleek, her blazer crisp, her eyes fierce and judgmental in a way that made me sit straighter without meaning to. She didn't look at me. She didn't even acknowledge the girls who were now frozen halfway down the slide. Her attention locked onto Daniel with laser precision. You missed the call with the board, she snapped. Then her gaze swept him from head to toe, landing on his faded jeans and wrinkled t-shirt. And this is what you thought you should be doing instead. His jaw tightened, and for a moment something flickered in his eyes. Annoyance, shame, anger, I couldn't tell. Then he said evenly, I'm spending time with my daughters. You know the people who matter. Her eyebrows shot up. And you don't think the company matters? I stared at Daniel, confusion swirling. Company board meeting. What was happening? Who was this woman? She finally noticed me turning with a forced, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. And who are you exactly? Before I could speak, Daniel stepped in. This is Sadie, his tone softened. A friend. The woman's expression shifted instantly from irritation to something sharper. Ah, a friend. She looked me up and down, and I felt my face heat. I hated that feeling, the familiar sting of being evaluated and dismissed in one glance. Then she turned back to Daniel with a sigh. I knew something was off when you started declining meetings. You can't afford distractions right now, not after the quarter we just had. My heartbeat kicked hard. Distractions, declining meetings, quarter. What was she talking about? Daniel stood, his voice tightening in a way I hadn't heard before. Laura, go home. This isn't your business. She scoffed. I'm your sister. Everything you do is my business. Sister. My eyes widened. Before I could process that, she added more sharply. You want to play the role of broke single dad in the park? Be my guest. But don't drag the company into your disappearing act. I blinked hard, the words crashing into me. Broke single dad disappearing act. None of it matched the Daniel I thought I had glimpsed, the quiet, careful man holding onto a life that seemed fragile but honest. Yet now everything felt hazy, blurred, not quite true, not quite false. Laura shook her head and walked off without waiting for a response, heels clicking furiously against the pavement. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face, exhaling slowly. I'm sorry you had to see that. I swallowed. You have a sister. He nodded. And a company. His voice was low. Yes. But that is not something I wanted to bring into whatever this is. Whatever this is. The words twisted in my chest. I looked at him, truly looked, and suddenly pieces began to shift. The clean hands, the careful posture, the practiced calm, the hollow panic at the check, the old car that didn't match anything else about him. He held my gaze, something raw flickering behind his eyes. I didn't lie to you, Sadie. I just didn't tell you everything. My heart thudded painfully. Why? His answer came in a whisper. Because I wanted one night where someone saw me. Not the name, not the money, just the man. And that was when the truth wavered again, not breaking, not shattering, but bending, revealing something far deeper than I expected. Something vulnerable, something real. I didn't know whether to step forward or backward. I only knew one thing. Nothing about Daniel was simple, and whatever this was between us, it was about to change everything. I walked home, with the girls' laughter still echoing faintly behind me, but the warmth it once brought now flickered uncertainly, as if doubt had reached out and pinched the flame low. My legs moved automatically, carrying me down familiar sidewalks, but my mind was far from steady ground. Everything about the park visit replayed in my head. Not softly the way sweet memories do, but sharply, like scenes forcing themselves back to the front of my thoughts before I was ready to look at them. Laura's voice cut through everything, first sharp, polished, cold. "You can't afford distractions." I could still hear it slicing through the quiet afternoon like a blade. The way she said distractions made me feel small, like an interruption in a world I had never been meant to enter. Then there was the other word, the one that had stuck to me like a burr I couldn't shake off. Disappearing act. The more I turned the phrase over in my mind, the heavier it felt. What was Daniel disappearing from? What life had he been stepping away from just to sit with me on a park bench? His posture, the way he braced when she approached the hollow way he said her name. All of it now made my stomach twist. And then, of course, there was the part I couldn't ignore no matter how hard I tried. A company, a board, meetings, money. This man who had shown up in worn jeans and a dented car, who looked like a tired, single father doing his best, who had frozen over a simple restaurant check. His truth had wavered in front of me for days, but now it shifted entirely, revealing a shape I didn't recognize. At my apartment door, I stopped keys dangling uselessly from my fingers as I leaned my forehead against the wood, exhaling a tremor I hadn't realized I'd been holding in. Why didn't he just tell me? He said he didn't lie, but not telling the truth felt dangerously close to the same thing. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, greeted by the familiar quiet, the soft clutter of books piled across every surface, the plants leaning toward the windows like they were hungry for sunlight. Normally, the space felt warm, small, but comforting, the kind of place where the world outside couldn't push too hard. But tonight, it felt tight, too tight, like my own thoughts were crowding me. I dropped onto the couch, pressing my palms over my eyes. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that he wasn't who he seemed, or the fact that I liked the man he pretended to be more than the truth he'd hinted at. I replayed the moment on the bench, the way his knee brushed mine, the warmth in his voice when he said he hadn't expected me to come, the softness in his eyes when he watched the girls run circles around us. None of that felt fake. None of it felt calculated. So why hide the rest? Why act broke? Why wait for his sister to expose everything in the most humiliating way possible? A soft knock at my memory tugged gently. The panic on his face when the check arrived at the restaurant. The hesitation, the fear. It wasn't pride. It wasn't manipulation. It was vulnerability. And something else. Shame. But shame over what? Over the truth that didn't make sense. If he really had money, then why pretend otherwise? Why try so hard to hide it from me? Why want a night where no one saw his name? But as soon as the questions formed, the darker ones followed behind them. What if he hadn't just withheld the truth? What if he had tested me? What if that dinner, that moment where I reached for the bill without thinking, was something he'd been waiting to see? What if this entire fragile spark was built on a lie? I shook my head hard, rejecting the thought, hating that it had found a foothold at all. I didn't want to believe Daniel capable of that. I couldn't reconcile the man on the bench with his daughters laughing in his arms with someone manipulative enough to play a game like that. But doubt doesn't need evidence. It only needs space, and I had given it plenty. My phone buzzed, suddenly startling me. I stared at Daniel's name glowing softly on the screen. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Finally, I lifted the phone with a heavy, reluctant breath. "I hope you got home safe," the message said. "The girls already miss you." A second bubble appeared quickly, like he was afraid to let silence take root. "And I miss you too." My heart cracked a little, not the painful kind, but the aching kind, the kind that comes when you want something to be simple and it refuses to be. I typed halfway into a reply before erasing it, then typed again, erased again. The truth wavered, and so did I. Eventually, I put the phone face down on the couch beside me and stared at the ceiling, letting the weight of everything settle. Maybe I needed time. Maybe I needed space to let the truth stop tilting beneath my feet long enough for me to understand what felt real and what didn't. But doubt has a cruel way of lingering longer than clarity. That night, lying in the dim glow of my bedside lamp, I wondered if the spark I had felt was a mistake or if it was still worth protecting. I wondered if his truth would ever stop wavering. I wondered if mine would too. The next morning came far too quickly, sunlight filtering through the blinds like thin blades of truth I wasn't ready to face, carving across my pillow and pulling me abruptly from a restless sleep filled with questions that held no answers. I tried to start the day normally, brewing coffee, tidying up, feeding the stray cat who visited my windowsill, but everything felt off balance, as if the world had shifted a few degrees overnight while I wasn't looking. Daniel's messages were still on my phone, waiting patiently, quietly, almost tenderly. I didn't open them again. I couldn't. Not yet. I went to work with a knot in my chest, telling myself that the familiar scent of old books and the innocent chatter of children would clear my head. But doubt followed me through every aisle like a shadow I could not shake. Just before noon, the library grew calm, a settling hush that usually comforted me, but today only amplified the rushing thoughts I had tried to outrun. Then, as I was shelving books in the biography section, a small voice behind me whispered, "Are you Miss Sadie?" I turned, expecting a child, but instead saw a girl older than the twins, maybe 10. Her hair pulled into a messy braid, and her backpack unzipped as if she had run straight from school. Her eyes were wide with something between hope and nerves. "Yes, sweetie," I said gently, kneeling to her height. "How can I help you?" She tugged nervously on her backpack strap. "I'm Lily. I'm Daniel's niece." My breath caught hard enough to sting. "Laura's daughter." Of course. She looked like her mother in the angles of her face, but her eyes were softer, uncertain, vulnerable in a way that made me instantly want to protect her. I forced a steady breath. "Does your mom know you're here?" Lily shook her head quickly, almost fearfully. "No, but I heard her talking last night." Loud. "She was yelling at Uncle Daniel again. She said you were ruining everything." The floor seemed to tilt under me. "Ruining everything," I repeated softly, trying to keep my voice level. Lily nodded, twisting her fingers together. She said, "Uncle Daniel needs to stop acting like someone he isn't and stop pretending he doesn't have responsibilities. She said he's being stupid, childish. And she said—" Lily hesitated, swallowing tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. I reached out and touched her shoulder gently. "It's okay, you can tell me," she whispered so quietly I almost missed it. She said, "You're just another problem he doesn't need." The words hit harder than I expected, sharp and cold in the small, quiet library. My stomach twisted, not because of the cruelty in Laura's voice. Cruelty I had already felt, but because of the pain in Lily's eyes as she repeated them. I took a slow breath and guided her toward one of the small reading tables. We sat down and she clutched the edge of her backpack like an anchor. "I'm sorry you heard that," I said softly. Adults say things when they're angry that aren't always fair or true. She nodded, but her eyes lowered. I know Mom says mean things. She says she's trying to protect the company, but she hurts people. She hurts Uncle Daniel a lot." I swallowed, my heart tightening. I knew something was wrong yesterday, but I didn't know how deep it went. Lily fiddled with her zipper. "Uncle Daniel is the only one who listens to me, the only one who doesn't make me feel like I'm in the way. When he smiles at me, it's different. It's real." A lump rose in my throat. Daniel was that kind of person, quietly protective, endlessly gentle, even when carrying more weight than anyone knew. I never once doubted the softness in him, only the truth surrounding everything else. Lily continued hesitantly. "Mom said you were trouble because she thinks Uncle Daniel cares about you." My breath caught. She said he doesn't have time for feelings, especially not with someone he barely knows. Even as she spoke, tears spilled down her cheeks, surprising her. She wiped them away, quickly, embarrassed, but I placed a hand over hers. "It's okay to feel things," I whispered. "It means you're human." She nodded, her lip trembling. "I didn't want to tell you, but I thought you should know." I wasn't sure what to say. Doubt had been eating at me for days, and now a child, this sweet, earnest child, was confirming the very thing Laura had tried to warn me about. That Daniel had two worlds. One with me, warm, gentle, honest in ways that felt fragile and real. And another with them, cold, pressurized, full of expectations he had not chosen but could not escape. I exhaled slowly, steadying my voice. "Thank you for trusting me, Lily." She nodded hard. "I just want Uncle Daniel to be happy. He tries so hard. And Mom keeps yelling at him." She says he needs to stop pretending to be something else. The word something else made my stomach twist again. Pretending. The same worry that had haunted me since the restaurant flared bright again, sharper this time. Was everything I'd shared with Daniel real? Or was it the version of him he wished he could be? But before the spiral could tighten, Lily suddenly reached into her backpack. "Oh, I almost forgot. I'm supposed to give you this." She handed me a folded piece of paper slightly crumpled at the edges. My name was written on the front in messy 6-year-old handwriting. Ella's handwriting. My heart jolted. "They made it last night," Lily whispered. "They were sad when you left the park early." I unfolded the paper carefully. 3 figures drawn with crooked smiles and round heads, all holding hands. Above them were tiny hearts and the words, "We like you, Miss Sadie," written in shaky purple marker. My vision blurred. In that moment, doubt didn't disappear. It didn't magically resolve itself. But something shifted. Something unmistakable. Because no matter what Daniel was hiding, no matter what truth wavered around him, this picture was real. The girls were real. Their affection was real. And maybe, just maybe, Daniel's feelings were too. Lily stood slowly slinging her backpack over her shoulder. "Please don't be mad at him. He's trying. More than anyone knows." I nodded, my voice thick. "I know." She gave me one last hopeful look and slipped out of the library, leaving me alone with the drawing trembling in my hands. The past had stepped forward today, not mine, not yet, but his. And now that I'd seen it, now that I understood the weight he'd been carrying, one thing became painfully clear. Whatever happened next was going to change everything. I left the library early that afternoon, the drawing from Ella and Emma tucked safely inside my bag like a fragile truth I wasn't ready to let go of, but the weight of everything else pressed so heavily against my chest that even breathing felt uneven as I walked home. The sunlight flickered through the trees, but did nothing to lift the strange hollow ache that had settled beneath my ribs. Lily's words replayed in my mind over and over, every syllable piercing in places doubt had already softened. "He's pretending. He's disappearing. He's carrying more than you know." I kept trying to tell myself she was just a child overhearing adult anger she didn't fully understand, but children see more than adults ever want them to, and her eyes had held too much truth to dismiss. When I reached my apartment building, a car I didn't recognize was parked near the entrance. Sleek black windows tinted the kind of car that stood out sharply against the older brick buildings on my street. My steps slowed even before I saw the figure leaning against it. Daniel. He looked different than I had ever seen him. Not the exhausted single father in worn jeans, not the gentleman on a park bench, but someone carrying the solemn weight of a life I hadn't been invited into. He wore a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hair combed neatly, though worry had pulled faint lines along his forehead. When his eyes met mine, something soft flickered there. Relief, maybe, or fear, or both tangled into something that made my heart pulse unevenly. "Sadie," he breathed, straightening as I approached, like he wasn't sure if I'd turn around and walk the other way. I stopped a few feet from him, clutching the strap of my bag a little too tightly. "Why are you here, Daniel?" He swallowed. "I needed to see you. I needed to explain." My chest tightened because I wanted explanations, but I also dreaded them, because explanations meant truth. And truth meant I couldn't hide behind the quiet illusion I'd let myself fall for. I gave a small nod, not trusting my voice. He exhaled shakily. "Everything Lily heard, everything Laura said, it wasn't supposed to crash into your world like that." I winced slightly at the use of the word crash, because that's exactly how it felt. His shoulders fell and he moved closer slowly as though approaching someone wounded. "I never meant to hide who I am to deceive you," he said, voice low and earnest. "I wasn't playing a game. I wasn't testing you." "I believe you," I whispered before I could stop myself. And I did believe him, but that didn't make the confusion hurt any less. He looked down, rubbing the back of his neck. "The truth is, I've spent the last 3 years drowning in expectations, pressure, responsibilities I never wanted. My father built the company, and when he died, everyone expected me to just step into his place. Keep everything running, keep everyone happy." "And what did you want?" I asked softly. He let out a slow breath. Something simple, something real, someone who sees me without the name, without the money, without the weight of everything I didn't choose. My heart twisted at that, because even through all the doubt, I understood that yearning, more than I wanted to admit. He stepped closer, his voice trembling slightly. The night we met, I wasn't pretending to be broke. I was exhausted. I grabbed an old car from my brother-in-law because mine was in the shop. I wore the first clothes clean enough to pass for decent because the girls were restless and grieving and needed something to distract them. And I didn't correct you because... He swallowed, because it felt nice to be nobody for one night. Heat pricked my eyes. But being nobody isn't honest, I said quietly. He nodded, pain flashing in his eyes. I know, and you deserved better than half-truths. I'm sorry, I really am. His voice cracked, and he looked at me with a sincerity that made everything inside me pull taut. I didn't expect to care this much. I didn't expect you to matter, but you do, and that scared me, because caring means something can break. I pressed a hand against my bag, feeling the faint outline of the girl's drawing beneath the fabric. I could still hear their giggles feel their arms around my neck when they hugged me goodbye at the park. That kind of affection couldn't be faked. That part had never wavered. Before I could speak, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from behind us, sharp against the pavement. Daniel tensed. I turned. Laura stormed toward us, anger snapping off her like static. "So this is where you've been," she spat, following after her niece. "Dragging more mess into our lives." Daniel stepped in front of me instinctively, his jaw tight. "Laura, go home." "No," she snapped. "I will not stand by while you burn down everything Dad built because you've developed feelings for some librarian." My breath hitched sharply. Some librarian. The words were meant to wound, and they did, but Daniel didn't flinch this time. His voice was firm. "You don't get to talk about her like that." Laura scoffed. "Oh, please. You're throwing away your reputation, your focus, the company for what? A night of playing family with someone who doesn't understand anything about our world?" "She doesn't need to understand our world," Daniel said through clenched teeth. "She understands kindness. She understands honesty. She understands my daughters better than half the people who claim to care about us. And she sees me. Not the money, not the company. Me." A heavy silence fell between the three of us, thick and strained. Laura's expression twisted with something between disbelief and fury. "You're making a mistake," maybe Daniel replied softly. "But it's mine to make." Laura shook her head sharply. "Dad would be ashamed." Daniel's breath caught as though she'd struck him. And that was when something in me snapped, not with anger, but with clarity. Laura's cruelty wasn't just sharp. It was calculated, born from years of pressure and expectation Daniel had been forced to carry alone. She didn't see the man I had seen. She didn't see the father who knelt to tie shoelaces, who kissed scraped knees, who let tiny hands tug him toward playground slides. She only saw the CEO, the heir, the obligation. And suddenly I realized something with piercing clarity. Daniel didn't want a different life for the sake of rebellion. He wanted it because he was drowning in one that never allowed him to breathe. I stepped forward, my voice steady. "Laura, I understand you're protecting what you think is important, but what's important to Daniel isn't the same thing." She glared at me. "Stay out of this." I shook my head. "I won't. Because your brother deserves one moment, one life that isn't dictated by everyone else." Laura opened her mouth to snap again, but Daniel lifted a hand, gently stopping her. "Laura, please, go home." She stared at him for a long, tense moment, then turned sharply and stormed back toward her car, her heels clicking furiously as she left. When she was gone, the street fell silent. Daniel turned back to me, something raw and hopeful flickering through his eyes. "I'm sorry," he murmured, "for all of this, for bringing chaos into your world, for making you doubt." I exhaled, feeling something inside me loosen just slightly. "Chaos doesn't scare me, Daniel. Lies do." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll tell you the truth. Everything. No more wavering, no more hiding. But not here. He swallowed, voice trembling. Come with me, please. I want you to see my real life, all of it. And that was the moment everything collided. Truth, fear, doubt, hope, right at my doorstep. And I knew that whatever happened next would decide everything. Daniel opened the passenger door for me like it was something he'd done 1,000 times, yet his hands trembled almost imperceptibly as he did it, as if he knew this moment mattered more than either of us had the strength to name. I hesitated for a heartbeat longer, not because I didn't want to go, but because something inside me whispered that stepping into that car meant stepping into a truth I couldn't unknow. But then I thought of the girls' laughter, their drawings, the way they reached for me without reservation, and I quietly climbed inside. Daniel exhaled as though my choice had pulled him back from the edge of something heavy, then rounded the hood and slid behind the wheel. The interior smelled faintly of pine and something warm, maybe vanilla from the little air freshener clipped to the vent. He didn't start the engine immediately. Instead, he rested his hands on the steering wheel and stared forward. I need you to know this isn't about impressing you, he said softly. It's about telling the truth before it finds a way to hurt you. I gave a small nod, sensing how much it cost him to say that. When he finally started the car, the drive was quiet, the kind of quiet that wasn't empty, but full of unsaid things pressing gently between us. I watched the city shift outside the windows, familiar streets dissolving into newer ones, and then those giving way to neighborhoods I rarely visited. Street lamps stretched taller houses grew larger, then larger still, with manicured lawns and long driveways that curved like private invitations into wealth I had only seen from afar. My heart thudded uncomfortably. Daniel gripped the wheel a little tighter. I'm taking you home, he said, to show you the part of my life I never wanted you to stumble into by accident. The gates appeared before I even processed the rest of his words, tall wrought iron bars that glinted in the fading sunlight. They opened automatically as the car slowed, a soft, mechanical hum cutting through the stillness. My breath caught. I had expected something nicer than a modest cottage, maybe a comfortable house, maybe even a place that hinted at comfort and privilege. I had not expected this. The driveway curved through lines of old trees, their branches forming a canopy overhead until the house came into view, large but not ostentatious, elegant, with its stone walls and warm lights glowing through tall windows. It wasn't a mansion meant to intimidate. It was a home built for a family that had once been whole. My throat tightened as Daniel parked near the front steps. He turned to me, eyes searching mine. Before we go inside, I need you to promise something. I swallowed. What? He exhaled shakily. Don't leave before you let me explain everything. My pulse fluttered at the vulnerability in his voice. I whispered, I won't. He nodded relieved and stepped out, walking around to open my door again. As we climbed the steps, a small face pressed against the window, then another. The door flew open before we reached it. Ella and Emma barreled toward us, barefoot curls bouncing their excitement loud and bright enough to break the tension in the air. Miss Sadie! They wrapped themselves around my legs so quickly I nearly lost my balance. You're here, Emma said, her voice a breathless giggle. You came. A lump formed in my throat. I crouched down and hugged them both, burying my face in their hair as if their tiny arms could anchor me to something safe. I missed you too, I whispered, feeling my voice splinter. When I stood, Daniel was watching us, something fragile and fierce in his eyes. Come in, he said quietly. Inside, the house was warm and lived in ways that surprised me. Toys scattered across the rug, colorful drawings taped to the fridge. Tiny shoes lined up by the door. This wasn't the sterile world of a man obsessed with money or image. This was a home stitched together with small hands and late-night stories and memories someone had fought desperately to preserve after loss. The girls dragged me toward the living room, climbing onto my lap before I had the chance to sit properly. Show her the picture we made? Ella insisted. Emma ran down the hallway to retrieve it, returning with a crumpled piece of paper decorated with glitter and marker scribbles. It said, "We love Miss Sadie." My chest tightened painfully. Daniel cleared his throat, drawing my gaze toward him. Can we talk? He asked, voice low. I nodded gently, easing the girls off my lap. Emma wrapped herself around my arm stubbornly. "Daddy is sad," she whispered. My breath hitched. Daniel's jaw clenched as he knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, I'm not sad right now. I'm just hopeful." Emma considered this, then let go and scampered off to join her sister. Daniel gestured toward a hallway. "Can we step into my office? It's quieter there." His office was nothing like I expected. No wall of certificates, no displays of power, just a large desk littered with papers, a bookshelf full of framed photos, and a soft lamp casting a warm glow. He closed the door gently and leaned against it for a long moment, as if gathering strength. Then he stepped forward. "I didn't lie about being overwhelmed," he began. "About struggling, about wanting something real. But I didn't tell you the whole story because I didn't know how to without pushing you away before you even knew me." My heart pounded. He continued. "I wasn't supposed to take over the company. My father built it from nothing, sacrificed everything to grow it, and when he passed, people looked at me like I was the next piece of machinery in the factory. Not a person. A tool. A continuation." I swallowed. "That's a lot to carry." He nodded. "I tried to be what they wanted. I tried to keep it all afloat. I buried myself in work and told myself grief would fade if I stayed busy enough. But then I lost the only person who made any of it worth it." My breath caught. "Your wife." He nodded again, pain flickering across his face. She was the balance in all this, the softness, the reason the house felt warm. When she died, the company swallowed me whole. I had nothing left for myself, let alone the girls. His voice cracked. I became two people, the CEO everyone expected, and the father who sat in the car just to breathe. The night we met. He paused, eyes lowering. "I didn't have the strength to be both. I didn't correct you because for the first time in years, I felt like one person again. Just Daniel. Not a man who had failed everyone's expectations. Not a man drowning in responsibility. Just a dad at a wrong table hoping someone might see him." Tears stung my eyes. He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "I should have told you sooner. I should have trusted that you could handle the truth. But I was scared you'd walk away once you realized who I really am." I looked at him, the weight of everything he'd shared pressing heavily against the fragile space between us. "Daniel." I whispered his name because it was all I could manage. He took another step. "I want you to see all of it. The good, the broken, the parts of me buried under years of pressure. I want you to know me, the real me." Then he reached for a drawer and pulled out something small, a wooden picture frame. Inside was the girl's drawing taped to my apartment door, the one they had made after the night everything fell apart. My breath stilled. "They've been asking for you every day," he said softly. "You matter to them. You matter to me." The silence stretched long and tender. Then he whispered, voice trembling, "Please don't walk away. Not after I finally told you everything." And as I stood there surrounded by the echoes of his truth and the quiet hum of the home he'd opened to me, I realized something with startling clarity. I hadn't just stepped into his world. Somehow, without meaning to, I had already become part of it. Fear has a way of filling a room even when no one says its name. And as I stood there in Daniel's office, surrounded by the remnants of a life built from pressure and grief, something inside me trembled under the weight of everything he had just shared. Not because the truth scared me, but because of how deeply it touched a part of me I had kept locked away for so long. He wasn't just asking me to understand who he was. He was asking me to see him, really see him in the rawness most people spend their entire lives trying to hide. And the strangest part was that the fear didn't push me away. Instead, it pulled me closer. I took a slow breath and stepped toward him, the soft glow of the lamp behind us stretching our shadows across the wall like two shapes searching for the courage to merge. He watched me with an expression that looked both hopeful and terrified. His hands slightly curled at his sides, as though he wasn't sure whether he should reach for me or let me go. "Daniel," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't scare me with the truth. You scared me by thinking I couldn't handle it. His eyes softened, his jaw tightening just enough to reveal the emotion he was fighting to keep steady. "I never wanted to risk losing you," he said quietly. But maybe that's exactly what made everything so fragile. Before either of us could say another word, a soft knock echoed through the door, followed by the tiny patter of bare feet. Emma peeked into the room, clutching a stuffed raccoon under her arm, her curls tousled like she'd been rolling around in a pillow fort. "Daddy Ella wants to know if Miss Sadie can read our new book. Please." The innocence in her voice melted something inside me that no confession ever could. Daniel turned to me silently, asking for permission to pause the conversation, and all I could do was nod. Some truths needed space to breathe. Emma grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the office before Daniel could even catch up, leading me to the living room where Ella sat cross-legged on a blanket fort they had built between the couch and two dining chairs. She held up a picture book with glittery stars on the cover. "Read," she demanded, her eyes shining. As I settled onto the floor, both girls climbing into my lap like they'd done it 1,000 times, something inside me shifted again. It wasn't fear this time. It was belonging. Daniel lingered in the doorway for a moment, watching us, one hand braced against the frame as if the sight alone was holding him upright. The story was simple, the kind of children's book that wrapped gentle messages in bright illustrations. But as I read each page aloud, I felt Daniel's gaze soften and warm and drift towards something deeper. When the girls finally dozed off in my arms, their breaths slow and sweet, he crossed the room quietly. "Let me take them," he whispered. Carefully, he scooped them into his arms, holding them with the kind of tenderness that comes from loving someone so fiercely it nearly undoes you. He carried them to their room while I sat on the rug, feeling the warmth of their little bodies lingering against my chest. When he returned, he didn't speak at first. He just stood there watching me, as though he was memorizing every detail to carry with him into whatever storm came next. "You're good with them," he finally said, his voice low, thick. "Better than anyone since—" His voice trailed off, but the unspoken word hung in the air like a fragile crystal. "Since their mother." I swallowed, feeling the weight of what that meant. "You don't have to compare us," I whispered. "I'm not replacing her." "I know," he replied quickly. "That's not what scares me." "Then what does?" I asked. He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "That this feels like something I could lose. Something I don't deserve, something too good for a man carrying everything I carry." I stood and moved toward him slowly, giving him room to step away if he needed to. But he didn't. Instead, he met me halfway, his breath unsteady. When I stopped in front of him, our faces inches apart, I said softly, "Daniel, fear doesn't make you unworthy. It makes you human." His eyes glistened in the dim lamplight, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he reached out, not to pull me close, but to hold my hand gently, reverently, like it was something delicate he was afraid to break. "Sadie," he whispered, "can I tell you one more truth?" The one I didn't say earlier. I nodded. He swallowed hard, then said, "I haven't felt peace in this house since the night Caroline died. Not once. Not until you read that story tonight." A warmth spread through my chest so quickly it nearly stole my breath. Daniel stepped closer, his forehead brushing mine, his voice trembling with a vulnerability that stripped away everything but honesty. "I'm falling for you. And it terrifies me because I know exactly how much it hurts to lose someone you love." My breath caught. Fear flickered inside me, too sharp and real, but it didn't make me recoil. It made me brave. I lifted my hand to his cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath my palm. "Maybe we can be scared together," I whispered. His eyes closed, a shuddering exhale slipping from his lips as if those words had cracked something heavy open inside him, and then slowly, carefully, he leaned in, pressing the softest, most hesitant kiss to my forehead. Not a romantic kiss. Not yet. But one filled with gratitude, trust, and a promise he wasn't ready to say out loud. When he pulled back, his voice was barely audible. "Stay tonight. Not because I want you to, but because they need you, and because I do too." I looked toward the hallway where the girls slept, then back at him. The fear inside me shifted again, turning into something softer, deeper, far more dangerous in the most beautiful way. I whispered, "I'm not going anywhere." and for the first time, fear didn't push us apart. It became the reason we moved closer. The next morning arrived with a stillness so heavy it felt like the house itself was holding its breath, sunlight barely slipping through the curtains as if afraid to disturb whatever fragile peace had settled during the night. I opened my eyes slowly, realizing I had fallen asleep on the couch wrapped in a soft throw blanket that definitely hadn't been there when I drifted off. Daniel must have placed it over me. The thought warmed me more than the blanket did. Before I could sit up fully, I heard soft footsteps padding through the hallway, followed by two sleepy voices whispering my name like a secret they were afraid would disappear if spoken too loudly. When I turned my head, Ella and Emma stood in the doorway in their pajamas, messy curls bouncing as they rushed forward and climbed onto the couch, curling into my sides, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. "You stayed," Emma murmured, her small hand gripping my arm. Ella snuggled closer. "We dreamed you left." I pulled them both into my arms, my heart aching at how easily children give love completely unguarded and full. "I'm here," I whispered. "I didn't go anywhere." Daniel appeared seconds later, leaning against the doorway with a look that made something deep inside my chest tighten. It wasn't just affection. It wasn't just relief. It was something closer to awe, like he was witnessing a moment he had once convinced himself he would never get back. "Morning," he said softly. "You okay?" I nodded, though my heart had started beating faster for reasons I didn't yet understand. He smiled a small, quiet smile, then looked at the girls. "Why don't you two wash up for breakfast?" They groaned in unison but obeyed, tumbling off the couch and scampering down the hallway. The moment they disappeared, Daniel's expression shifted. There was hesitation now, a kind of nervousness I hadn't seen in him before. He walked slowly toward me and sat down on the armchair across from the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "Sadie," he murmured, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said a long time ago." The air tightened between us. I folded the blanket onto my lap, bracing myself. His voice lowered. "It's about my name." I frowned, confused. "Your name." He took a slow breath. "You know me as Daniel Rhodes, but that isn't my full name. It's not the one people whisper in boardrooms or the one reporters chase." He paused, eyes searching mine as though trying to gauge whether I was ready. "My real name is Daniel Rhodes Harrington." Harrington. The word landed like a stone dropped into still water ripples moving outward, steady and widening. I stared at him, the realization hitting slowly, painfully, layer by layer. Harrington. The multi-million-dollar conglomerate. A legacy family. A name on hospitals, tech campuses, charity galas. A name that attracted cameras the same way flames attracted moths. I swallowed hard. That Harrington. His jaw tightened. Yes. Suddenly, the paparazzi outside the library, the sudden frenzy, the way the director had panicked, the whispers, the chaos, it all made a horrible kind of sense. "You're an heir," I whispered, not quite able to steady my voice. "You're the Harrington." He flinched, just barely. "I hate that word," he said quietly. "I've spent years trying not to drown in it. But it's true. My parents built everything on control image money. And when I had the girls when Caroline died, I realized I couldn't raise them in that world, so I walked away from most of it. I changed my name legally for every part of my life except the business I couldn't fully step out of. I just needed a chance to be someone honest, someone human, someone they could trust." I stared at him, breath shaking. All the doubts that had gnawed at me for days suddenly turned into something sharper. "You lied to me." His eyes squeezed shut for a moment, pained. "I didn't tell you yes. I didn't correct you when you thought I was someone ordinary, but I never lied about who I was with you. Not once." My heart lurched painfully. "Daniel, you didn't give me a chance to know the whole truth." He nodded slowly, accepting it, not defending himself. "I know, and I'm sorry. I just needed to be seen as a man before being seen as a name." I needed that more than I realized. I stood, pacing, hands trembling. "This changes everything," I whispered. He stood too, not moving closer, giving me space but refusing to look away. "No, Sadie. It explains everything. But it doesn't change what's real." I shook my head, overwhelmed. The press, the donors, my job, the storm. All of that happened because of your name, and you didn't trust me enough to tell me. His voice cracked when he answered. I didn't trust myself. That stopped me long before you did. My breath softened, but the ache remained. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Look, I know you're hurt, and you deserve to be. But please, Sadie, let me show you what my world really is. Not the headlines, not the chaos, the truth. Before I could answer, the girls came running back into the room, laughing as they hopped onto the couch, completely unaware of the storm swirling between us. Mommy, look! Ella exclaimed, holding up a messy drawing. We drew a family picture. My breath caught. In the center of the page were 4 stick figures labeled Daddy, Emma, Ella, and me. My knees nearly buckled. The girls smiled proudly, waiting. Daniel's voice softened, almost breaking. They did that last night, before they fell asleep. Because in their hearts, you're already part of us. I felt something crumble inside me. Something made of fear, doubt, and the walls I had built around myself. Daniel stepped closer, but not too close, his voice a whisper. My name changed everything you think you know, but it doesn't change the way they see you, or the way I feel about you. The room fell silent, thick and fragile. Then he said the words that shifted the ground beneath my feet. Sadie, I don't want a world that doesn't have you in it. I froze, breath caught, heart pounding. Because despite everything, the truth, the fear, the chaos, those were the words that broke through everything. Those were the words that made the world tilt back into place. For a long moment after Daniel said those words, the room felt suspended in a quiet so delicate it almost hurt to breathe sunlight, drifting in slow, golden ribbons across the floor, as if even the morning understood that something irreversible had just been placed between us. I stood there holding the girls' drawing, my fingers trembling around the edges of the paper, their tiny stick figure version of me smiling between them like I already belonged, like I had always been meant to stand in that little gap between their small hands and his steady presence. Daniel watched me with an expression that carried both fear and hope, the kind of look that made my heart twist because it wasn't the look of a billionaire heir or a man who lived with a legacy chained to his name, but a father trying to hold together the parts of his life that mattered, terrified that one day they might slip through his fingers. I opened my mouth, but no words came, because nothing felt big enough. Not the confusion, not the hurt, not the overwhelming tenderness rising inside me like the beginning of a tide I could no longer resist. The girls tugged at my hands, their voices soft as they asked if I liked the picture. I knelt down, gathering them into my arms, feeling them breathe against my shoulders, feeling the steady beat of something that felt frighteningly close to family. Yes, I whispered, my voice cracking. I love it. When they pulled back, giggling and bursting off toward the kitchen, the house shifted again into quiet, leaving Daniel and me standing in the warm afterglow of their laughter. He took one hesitant step toward me, then stopped, respecting the distance that had never felt wider. Sadie, he murmured, if you never want to see me again, I'll take the girls and leave right now. I'll make it easy for you. Just tell me. The sincerity in his voice punched the air from my lungs. I looked at him, really looked at the man who had walked into a diner wearing worn jeans, juggling 2 kids and too many fears. At the man who had driven a beat-up sedan because he didn't want wealth to scare someone away. At the man who sat through chaos and spaghetti messes and library story hours with nothing but gentleness. And then I thought of the other man, the one who carried a last name that shook industries, a name people feared or chased, a name that had flipped my world upside down without warning. My voice trembled as I said, You should have told me. You should have trusted me with the truth. He nodded, swallowing hard. I know, and I'm so sorry. I've spent so long trying not to let that name define me, I didn't realize hiding it would define everything between us anyway. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of his confession settle. When I opened them again, he was still there, hands at his sides, eyes unshielded and raw. I whispered, I'm not sure I can handle your world. His voice softened to something almost fragile. Then don't handle the world. Handle me. My breath caught. Because he meant it. Because the storm around us was loud, but the quiet between us, the quiet that existed when the girls slept on my lap, when he watched me read to them when we stood inches apart in the kitchen late at night, that was real. I stepped closer. Just one step. His shoulders sagged with relief he didn't dare show. "Daniel," I said quietly, "if I stay, I won't survive half-truths. There can't be any more secrets." He pressed a hand over his chest as though steadying himself. "Then there won't be. Ever again." I searched his face, needing to see sincerity, regret, hope, all of it, and there it was, every emotion laid bare without pretense. Then something inside me shifted, opening like a window, allowing light through after too many days of gray. I exhaled. "Okay." He froze. "Okay, what?" I forced a breath. "I'm still hurt. And I'm scared, but I'm not walking away." The words landed like a spark caught in dry tinder, his entire body seeming to release tension all at once, disbelief softening into something achingly tender. He moved, then slowly giving me time to step back if I needed to, but I didn't. When his hands finally reached mine, his palms were warm, trembling. "Sadie," he murmured, "you have no idea what you mean to me." I didn't answer with words. I stepped into him, letting my forehead rest against his chest, listening to the frantic, shaky rhythm of his heartbeat. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close with a mixture of reverence and desperation, as though he couldn't quite believe I was still there. The kitchen doorway filled with soft footsteps, and the girls peeked out, their little faces beaming when they saw us. Ella whispered loudly, "They're hugging!" Emma gasped. "Should we hug too?" Daniel laughed, something bright and unguarded breaking through the heaviness. "Come here, you two." They raced forward, colliding into us with squeals and tiny arms that wrapped around our legs and waists, turning the moment into one warm, tangled knot of limbs and hearts. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't cinematic. It was messy and human and perfect. Later that afternoon, we walked to the backyard, the girls running ahead with ribbons trailing behind them as the breeze wove through their curls. The sunlight fell in golden patches across the grass, warming the old wooden table that Daniel had sanded and restored the night before. He picked up a glass lantern from the porch, one the girls had decorated with pressed flowers and stickers. We all gathered around as he whispered, "I want this to be our first promise." I frowned slightly. "A promise?" He nodded, lighting the small candle inside the lantern, the flame flickering to life, shimmering against the glass. "A promise that whatever happens, we stand together. No hiding. No running. Light, not shadows." The girls nodded solemnly, as though understanding the weight of the ritual. Then he looked at me, eyes searching mine. "Sadie, will you make that promise with us?" I felt something inside me settle like the final click of a puzzle piece long missing. I reached forward, placing my hand over his. "Yes. Always, yes." Together we lifted the lantern and placed it on the porch railing. The late afternoon light caught the flame, making it glow brighter, steadier, reflecting back into our faces like a quiet vow. The girls wrapped their arms around us again, and for the first time in a long time, there was no fear, no doubt, no storm at the door. There was only light, and in that light, a family ours finally became whole. Sometimes a story like this does more than entertain us. It reminds us of something we once believed and something we may have forgotten along the way, something the world has tried again and again to convince us no longer exists. But deep down, you and I both know it still does. Love that grows slowly, healing that arrives gently, kindness that enters the room without fanfare. The kind of connection that isn't loud or dramatic or curated for the world to see, but real in a way that reaches the quiet corners of the heart. As you listened to this story, maybe you felt a familiar ache rise in your chest, a tug that pulled at old memories, old wounds, old hopes you buried because life demanded you stay strong. Maybe you've lost something. Maybe you've loved someone who's no longer here. Maybe you've carried your struggles in silence because the world doesn't always make room for softness. But stories like this one remind us that even after storms, even after heartbreak, even after years of feeling unseen, something beautiful can still find its way to us. It may not arrive in grand gestures, It may come in the form of a quiet dinner, a child's messy drawing, a whispered confession, a warm porch light glowing at the end of a long day. It may come exactly when you've stopped expecting it. And maybe that is what makes it real. Maybe that is what makes it powerful. If this story touched you today, if it stirred something in you, if it made you breathe a little deeper or hope a little harder, or believe, even for a moment, that good things are still possible, no matter your age or your past or your scars, then I want to invite you to stay with us. This channel exists for you, for the person who has lived enough life to understand heartbreak, for the one who knows how fragile moments can be, for the one who cherishes sincerity because they've seen how rare it is, for the one who values kindness because they've lived through years when it felt hard to find. Every story we share here is crafted for the heart, for your heart. Stories of second chances, quiet miracles, unexpected love, forgiveness that arrives late but arrives anyway. Stories that remind you that you're never too old to feel deeply, to begin again, to rediscover joy, to find a hand that fits into yours, or to let light back into places you thought would stay dark forever. If you felt that today, if something in this story wrapped around you like a blanket and whispered you're not alone, then I hope you'll subscribe. Not for numbers, not for algorithms, but so you never miss another moment that speaks to your soul exactly when you need it. Life gets heavy, the world moves fast, but here in this little corner, we slow down, we breathe, we remember, and we tell stories that hold us together. Stories that remind us that love still shows up, that healing still happens, that family can be built in unexpected ways, and that even the quietest connection can change a life. So if this story meant something to you, even if just a little, stay with us. Let the next story meet you exactly where you are. Let it carry you through the evening, through the silence, through whatever you're facing right now. Hit subscribe so you never miss another journey like this one. And until the next story, take care of your heart. It has carried you through so much, and it deserves every soft, beautiful thing still waiting ahead of you.